stand where she slept at night. Every Thursday afternoon, a burly biker from the Silverwood Wardens rumbled up to a tiny fruit stand on a forgotten county road, bought a bag of bruised peaches from a smiling old woman, and thought nothing more of it, until the day he left his wallet behind. When he returned after dark, the stand was shuttered, and a flicker of candlelight leaked from beneath the counter. He found the old woman curled on a nest of burlap sacks, her only pillow a bag of apples. What he discovered next about her life, the lost orchard, the medical debts, the silent starvation, would mobilize an entire motorcycle club to turn her last harvest into a home. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your city or town in the comments below. We want to see how far the Hidden Heroes family reaches. Subscribe to Hidden Heroes, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to hear a story about real-life angels on two wheels. County Road 9 was the kind of road that maps forgot. It snaked through the hollows and ridges of the Harrowpine Valley, a narrow ribbon of cracked asphalt lined with wild blackberry brambles and the ghosts of old farmsteads that had surrendered to the forest decades ago. The only traffic was the occasional logging truck, a battered pickup, or the rumble of motorcycles. And at a bend where a great oak cast dappled shade, there sat a fruit stand so small and humble that you could drive past it 100 times without truly seeing it. The stand was a simple wooden table beneath a faded canvas awning, its legs uneven, its surface warped by years of sun and rain. Hand-painted signs advertised peaches, apples, pears, and honey, the letters wobbly but legible. Behind the table, in a sagging lawn chair with a knitted blanket draped over her knees, sat an old woman named Jessamine Croft. She was 79 years old, thin as a dried cornstalk, with hair the color of wood ash pinned up in a bun that had long since surrendered its neatness. Her skin was papery and sun-bronzed, her eyes a watery shade of blue, and her hands were gnarled with arthritis but still capable of arranging fruit into careful pyramids. She wore a faded floral dress, a patched cardigan, and a straw hat that had seen better decades. And she smiled at every single person who passed, whether they stopped or not. For many weeks, a biker named Selim Frost had been stopping. Selim was the president of the Silverwood Wardens, a motorcycle club that had made its home in a converted cider mill at the edge of Harrowpine Valley. The Wardens were not a gang. They were a fellowship of riders who had pledged their steel and their lives to patrolling the forgotten back roads and taking care of the people the world had left behind. Selim was 48 years old, broad-shouldered and thick-armed, with a shaved head, a grizzled gray beard, and eyes the deep, weathered brown of old saddle leather. His leather cut was a dense tapestry of his life's mission. The top rocker read Silverwood Wardens, the bottom rocker rooted in mercy, and the central emblem was a great silver tree with its roots spreading wide and its branches sheltering a cluster of small houses. Around it clustered patches, a medic cross, a child's handprint, a loaf of bread and a cup, a road captain's bar, and a patch that read "See the Small Things." His vice president was a woman named Lyra Vance, a former social worker with close-cropped silver hair, a weathered face, and a calm, steady presence that could soothe even the most chaotic crisis. The club's medic was a young man named Wren, only 25, who had been a paramedic before burnout sent him to the open road. There was a giant mechanic named Ogden who could lift an engine block, but wept openly at sad movies. And there was a prospect named Jonah, a quiet 18-year-old who had aged out of the foster system and found his first real family among the Wardens. Selim had discovered Jessamine's fruit stand by accident. He'd been scouting a new route for the club's charity rides and had taken a wrong turn onto County Road 9. The peaches had caught his eye, small, sun-warmed, and imperfect, the kind you didn't see in grocery stores. He'd bought a bag, and Jessamine had thanked him with such genuine, trembling warmth that he'd felt something shift in his chest. He started stopping every Thursday. He'd buy a bag of whatever was ripe, exchange a few pleasantries about the weather, and ride on. She never mentioned her circumstances, and he never asked. But there were signs, if you knew how to look. The way her cardigan was mended in a dozen places. The way the fruit was always slightly bruised, as if it had been picked from the ground rather than the tree. The way her eyes would follow his motorcycle until it disappeared around the bend, as if holding onto the last trace of human connection. And the way, no matter how early or late he arrived, she was always there, as if she had nowhere else to be. The discovery came on a Thursday evening in late September, when the air carried the first bite of autumn. Selim had bought his usual bag of peaches and ridden 10 miles before he realized he'd left his wallet on the table. He cursed, turned around, and sped back. By the time he reached the bend, the sun had set entirely, and the fruit stand was closed, the awning folded down, the table cleared, the signs taken in. But a faint, flickering light glowed from beneath the table, seeping through the gaps in the boards. Selim killed his engine and dismounted quietly. He approached the stand and saw that the space under the table had been enclosed with old tarps and blankets, creating a rough shelter. A candle stub burned in a tin can, and in its trembling light, he saw Jessamine Croft curled on a bed of empty burlap sacks, her head resting on a bag of apples. She was wrapped in her knitted blanket, and her straw hat was placed over her face to block the light. She was asleep, or trying to be. Her body was so still that for a terrible moment, Selim thought she had passed in the night. He knelt, the gravel digging into his knees. "Ma'am? Mrs. Croft." She stirred, her hand fluttering up to move the hat. Her pale blue eyes blinked at him, unfocused at first, then sharpening into recognition, and then flooding with a deep, humiliated shame. She struggled to sit up, her bones creaking. "Mr. Frost, you forgot your wallet. It's here. I kept it safe." She fumbled under the sacks and produced the worn leather billfold. "I wasn't going to steal it, I swear." Selim's heart cracked. "I know you weren't. That's not why I came back. Jessamine, why are you sleeping under a fruit stand?" She was silent for a long time. The candle flickered, and somewhere an owl called. Then, with the slow, halting cadence of someone releasing a secret they'd carried too long, she began to speak. She told him that she and her husband, Abram, had owned an orchard on the ridge, 20 acres of peaches, apples, and pears, with a little white farmhouse and a barn they'd built together. They had been married for 51 years, childless but content, and the orchard had sustained them through every season. Then Abram had gotten sick. Pancreatic cancer. It moved fast, and the medical bills moved faster. They'd refinanced the farm to pay for treatments that didn't save him. When Abram died, Jessamine was left with a mountain of debt, and the bank took the orchard. She was evicted just before the last harvest. "That's the fruit you've been buying," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's from the trees Abram planted. The new owners let me harvest the drops, the fruit that falls on the ground. They said I could sell it, as long as I cleared it off the property. So I do. Every morning, I walk 3 miles to the orchard, pick up the bruised fruit, and bring it here." She looked down at her hands, the gnarled knuckles. "I've been sleeping here for 6 months. I didn't know where else to go. I don't have any family. I don't have anything except this fruit." Selim felt a cold, righteous fury kindle in his gut, not at her, but at the world that had allowed this to happen. But his voice was gentle when he spoke. "You're not staying here tonight. I'm with a motorcycle club, the Silverwood Wardens. We've got a clubhouse with warm beds, a kitchen that never runs out of soup, and a family of riders who will not let a 79-year-old woman sleep on burlap sacks. Please, let me take you there. No strings. Just a roof and a meal." Jessamine's eyes filled. "I can't pay you. I can't even afford your peaches. You don't have to pay anything. That's not how the Wardens work." He helped her gather her meager belongings: the blanket, the candle, the bag of apples, a small wooden box of photographs, and strapped them to his bike. She climbed onto the back, her thin arms wrapped around his waist, and they rode through the dark to the Silverwood Wardens clubhouse, a converted cider mill with a large communal kitchen, a fire pit, and a wing of private rooms for members. Lyra was the first to meet them at the door. She took one look at Jessamine's exhausted face, her shaking hands, and her patched cardigan, and her expression shifted into the calm, efficient compassion of a social worker who had seen too many cases like this. She guided Jessamine to a warm room with a real bed, clean linens, and a window that looked out onto a garden. She brought a bowl of hot lentil soup and a cup of tea. She sat with Jessamine while she ate, asking gentle questions and learning the full, heartbreaking story. By morning, the entire club knew, and by the next afternoon, they had already begun to act. Lyra used her old social work contacts and the club's legal fund to investigate the foreclosure. What she found was a web of predatory lending practices, hidden fees, inflated interest rates, and a foreclosure that had been pushed through despite Jessamine's attempts to negotiate. With the help of a pro bono attorney who owed the wardens a favor, she filed an emergency motion to halt any further sale of the orchard and began building a case to challenge the foreclosure in court. Ogden went to the orchard with a truck and a crew of prospects. The new owners had abandoned the property after the harvest, and the farmhouse was empty, the trees overgrown, the barn sagging. Ogden saw it not as a ruin, but as a project. He spent the next month repairing the farmhouse, patching the roof, fixing the windows, restoring the plumbing. Wren, the medic, assessed Jessamine's health and discovered she was malnourished, anemic, and dehydrated. He put her on a careful meal plan, supplemented with vitamins, and arranged for a visiting nurse to check on her weekly. Jonah, the young prospect who had aged out of foster care, took on the role of daily companion. He'd sit with Jessamine in the clubhouse garden, listen to her stories about Abram, and help her plant a small herb box, the first thing she'd planted in over a year. Selim himself spent hours on the phone with the bank, the attorney, and the county's senior advocacy board. He was polite but relentless, and eventually the bank agreed to a settlement. The Silverwood Wardens paid off the remaining debt from their family rescue fund, a pool of money raised through charity rides and donations. In exchange, Jessamine would own the orchard free and clear, and the club would hold a conservation easement that ensured the land could never be foreclosed on again. The orchard would be hers, and she would never have to sleep under a fruit stand again. But the club didn't stop there. The Sunday before Jessamine was due to return to her farmhouse, the Silverwood Wardens organized a restoration ride. Over 60 bikers from 3 allied clubs assembled at the old orchard, their motorcycles lining the lane like a gleaming promise. They brought tools, saplings, paint, and food. They spent the day repairing the barn, planting new apple and pear trees to replace the ones that had died, painting the farmhouse a fresh, creamy white, and building a sturdy new fruit stand at the end of the driveway. This one with a lockable storage shed, a real roof, and a sign that read Croft Orchard, home of the sweetest drops. Jessamine stood in the middle of her orchard, surrounded by leather-clad strangers who had become her family, and sobbed. Ogden, his beard full of sawdust, handed her a handkerchief. "It's all right, ma'am. These trees will fruit for another 50 years, and we'll be here to help you pick them." Wren presented her with a small, custom-made patch, a silver tree with roots, matching the warden's emblem, but with a single fallen peach beneath it. "This is for you," he said. "It means you're part of the family now." Lyra hugged her, and Selim knelt beside her chair. "You told me once that Abram said the orchard was a promise, that as long as the trees grew, your love was still alive. Well, the trees are still growing, Jessamine. And now, so are you." The season that followed was one of extraordinary renewal. The new trees took root, the renovated farmhouse was filled with warmth and laughter, and Jessamine, for the first time since Abram's death, was not alone. The Silverwood Wardens helped her establish a small farm stand business that didn't just sell drops. It sold premium fruit, homemade preserves, and honey from hives that Ogden had installed. A portion of the proceeds went back into the club's family rescue fund, ensuring that other families facing foreclosure would have the same safety net. Jessamine became a beloved figure in the Harrowpine Valley, known as the Peach Lady. But now her peaches were beautiful, and so was her smile. The old fruit stand on County Road 9 was never used for shelter again. Jessamine asked the club to leave it standing, but they transformed it into a kindness stop, a tiny roadside shelter stocked with water, non-perishable food, blankets, and a sign that read, "If you are lost or cold, take what you need." This stand is a reminder that someone sees you. Bikers from the Silverwood Wardens checked it weekly, restocking supplies and leaving fresh fruit from Croft Orchard. And every Thursday afternoon, Selim Frost still rode up to the orchard, but now he didn't buy peaches. He sat on the porch with Jessamine, drinking lemonade and listening to her stories about Abram, the seasons, the way love outlasts everything. One autumn evening, as the sun set behind the silver trees, Jessamine took his hand. "You came back for your wallet," she said, her voice soft. "But you stayed for me. I will never forget that." Selim's eyes were wet. "We don't leave anyone behind, Jessamine. Especially not the people who feed us bruised peaches with a smile. The orchard still thrives, and the Silverwood Wardens still ride. And somewhere on County Road 9, a little fruit stand stands as a monument to the night a biker forgot his wallet and found a family.